Let's talk about something that a lot of women experience, but many don't recognize them until they're already emotionally invested. You meet a man, he seems quite interesting. You enjoy spending time together. The conversation flows. You enjoy his company. But something always feels slightly off. You can't quite explain it. No matter how much time you spend together, the relationship never seems to go deeper. It stays in this strange middle space. Not quite casual, but not truly emotionally connected either. If that sounds familiar, you might be dealing with an emotionally unavailable man. And today, I want to walk through 5 signs that can help you recognize this early. Because the sooner you recognize the pattern, the easier it becomes to protect your emotional well-being. And stay with me until the end, because the final sign is actually the one that tends to reveal everything. Yet many people overlook it while focusing on the smaller details. Before we get into the list, let's clarify something important. An emotionally unavailable man is not always a bad person. Sometimes he might genuinely like you, and sometimes he might even care about you a whole lot. But liking someone and being emotionally capable of building a relationship are 2 different things entirely. Emotional availability is about vulnerability. It's about communication. It's about emotional presence. It's the ability to connect, share feelings, and allow another person to see who you really are. And when those things are missing, the relationship can start to feel confusing and frustrating. Because part of you senses the potential, but the connection never fully develops. And interestingly, many emotionally unavailable men don't even realize they're emotionally distant. This is why the patterns can be difficult to recognize at first. So let's start with the first sign. Sign number 1. He avoids emotional depth. You might notice that he can talk for hours about certain topics like work, sports, hobbies, funny stories, random observations about life. But the moment the conversation becomes emotional or personal, something changes. Maybe you start sharing something meaningful about your life, something that actually matters to you. And suddenly, he changes the subject, or he makes a joke, or he gives a very short response and moves on. This often happens because emotional conversations requires vulnerability, and vulnerability can feel uncomfortable for someone who has learned to keep their emotions guarded. So instead of leaning into those deeper conversations, they stay on the surface. Everything remains light, safe, non-emotional. And if you ever left a conversation thinking I just opened up, but he barely responded, that feeling is often the first quiet signal that emotional depth may be missing. But emotional distance doesn't only show up in conversations. It often shows up in relationship patterns as well. Sign number 2. His relationship patterns stay casual or inconsistent. When you start learning about his past relationships, you may begin noticing a pattern. Maybe he has had very few serious relationships. Maybe most of his connections were short-term, casual dating, situationships, things that started but never really became committed relationships. And sometimes the explanations all sound similar. It just didn't work out. We weren't compatible. She wanted something more serious, but I wasn't ready. Of course, everyone's relationship history is different. But when the same type of relationship keeps repeating over and over, it can sometimes signal a deeper pattern. Emotionally unavailable people often prefer dynamics that don't require deep emotional commitment. But there's another part to this pattern. You might also notice that his attention comes in waves. One week, he's very engaged. He texts often. He makes plans. He seems excited to see you. Then suddenly, something shifts. He becomes distant. The communication slows down. And you find yourself wondering, what happened? Did you say something wrong? Did something change? But often, The reason is simpler. Emotional closeness started increasing, and that triggered discomfort. So he instinctively pulls back. If you've ever felt like the relationship suddenly shifted, right when things started getting closer, that push and pull dynamic is one of the most common patterns in emotionally unavailable relationships. But there's another sign that often becomes noticeable over time. Sign number 3. You don't feel like a priority. When someone is emotionally invested in you, they naturally create space for you in their lives. They make time for you, they follow through on plans, they show consistency. But when someone is emotionally unavailable, you may begin to feel like you only exist in the empty spaces of their schedule. Plans may be cancelled, communication may become inconsistent. You might feel like you are always the one initiating contact or trying to maintain the connection. And slowly, something uncomfortable becomes clear. You seem to be investing more emotional energy into the relationship than he is. And this is where many people start questioning themselves, wondering if they are asking for too much, when in reality, they might simply be asking the wrong person. But the emotional distance doesn't stop there. It often becomes even more visible in how feelings are handled. Sign number 4, your emotions don't seem fully understood. At some point in every relationship, emotions come into conversation. You share something personal, maybe something that hurts you, maybe something that worries you, maybe something you're struggling with. But instead of feeling heard, the response feels shallow. Maybe he gives very short answers. Maybe he changes the subject. Or maybe he says things like, "You're overthinking. You're too sensitive. It's not that serious." When someone is uncomfortable with their own emotions, they often struggle to sit with emotional vulnerability in others. And instead of leaning into the conversation, they unintentionally dismiss it. Over time, this can make you feel like your feelings are somehow too much. Like you need to start minimizing your emotions in order to keep the peace. And if you've ever thought to yourself, why does it feel like he just doesn't really get me? That question is often pointing towards emotional disconnection. But the final sign tends to bring all the other signs together. Sign number 5. The relationship constantly leaves you confused. Healthy relationships may have challenges, but they usually feel emotionally stable. You know where you stand. You feel secure in the connection. You don't feel like you're constantly trying to interpret someone's behavior. But when someone is emotionally unavailable, the relationship often feels uncertain. You analyze messages, you reply conversations in your mind. You try to understand mixed signals. And over time, that uncertainty becomes emotionally exhausting. Because instead of simply experiencing the relationship, you feel like you're constantly trying to solve it. And if you constantly feel like you're trying to figure out the relationship instead of enjoying it, that confusion itself is often the biggest clue. Now, here's something very important to remember. Emotional unavailability often has deeper roots. It can come from past heartbreak. It can come from childhood experiences. Or it can come from simply never learning how to process emotions in a healthy way. But understanding the reason does not mean you have to accept the situation. A healthy relationship requires two people who are emotionally present. And if you constantly feel unseen, unheard, or emotionally disconnected, it may be a sign that the dynamic simply isn't meeting your needs. So the most important thing you can do is pay attention to patterns, not promises, not potentials. Patterns. Because patterns reveal whether someone is truly capable of building the kind of relationship you deserve. And ultimately, you deserve a connection where emotional openness, respect, and communication exist on both sides. Now, I would love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever encountered someone who seemed emotionally unavailable in a relationship? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more discussions about relationships, emotional intelligence, and personal growth. I am Rox Brown. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.